Hey everyone, and welcome back to Talk Room. We're diving into something pretty exciting today, but also maybe a little bit daunting. Setting ourselves up for success in 2025.
Yeah, you know that feeling, right? New year, new goals.
But sometimes it's tough to even know where to begin.
For sure.
Well, lucky for you, we've got this awesome guide that breaks it all down.
Yeah, specifically for 2025.
Exactly.
What's really cool is this guide doesn't just jump into setting new goals, all bright and shiny.
Right?
It starts by saying, hey, let's take a look back at 2024.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, take inventory before you go shopping.
Wait, what do you already have? What worked, what didn't? So you don't end up with the same stuff you never used.
Exactly. And the guide actually lays out some really thought-provoking reflection questions.
Oh, cool.
It asks you to think about your biggest accomplishments in 2024.
Okay.
The challenges you faced, any goals you maybe set but didn't quite achieve.
Yeah.
And I think most importantly, the lessons you learned throughout the year.
I love that. It makes you think back and kind of reevaluate everything.
Yeah, totally.
This reminds me of when I was trying to host Speaker. Speaker shares a relatable anecdote about a past goal, what went well, what didn't, and what was learned.
Wow.
I thought I was doing everything right. But looking back, I realized I hadn't really accounted for a specific factor.
Yeah.
Huge learning experience.
It's so interesting how those learning experiences are like pure gold, Reflecting isn't about dwelling on the past.
Right.
It's about using those little nuggets of wisdom to inform our future actions.
Exactly.
Understanding what strategies worked for you and where you might need to adjust.
So we've done some serious soul searching.
Yes.
And now we're ready to look ahead.
Okay.
I'm guessing this is where SMART goals come in.
Probably.
I've heard that term a lot.
Yeah.
But honestly, I'm not always sure I'm applying it correctly.
We're not alone.
Got there.
A lot of people get a little lost in the acronym.
Right.
It stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Okay. And you know what? There's a reason why this framework is so popular.
Yeah.
I mean, each element is crucial to setting yourself up for success.
So let's break that down.
Okay.
Specific. I get that.
Yeah.
It means your goal needs to be super clear.
Right.
No room for being vague.
Exactly.
Like instead of saying, I want to read more, you'd say, I want to read one book every month.
Perfect example. And then measurable kind of goes with that. It means you can actually keep track of how you're doing.
Right.
Super important for staying motivated.
Totally.
So instead of saying, I want to save money, you'd say, I want to save $500 per month.
Okay.
Then you can actually see those savings grow.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Achievable. That one sometimes trips me up.
Really?
Because, I can be super ambitious.
Yeah.
And set these ridiculously high goals that are like not very realistic.
It's a tough balance.
Yeah.
You want to challenge yourself. But you also need to be honest with yourself about, your current capacity and resources.
Right.
Like if you're just getting started with fitness, aiming to run a marathon next month might not be the best goal.
Okay, good point.
Maybe start with a 5K.
Yeah.
And build up from there.
Build up.
Exactly.
Okay, relevant. I think that was pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, it kind of speaks for itself.
Your goals should align with, your values, your passions.
Yeah.
Your overall vision for your life.
Absolutely.
Makes sense.
If your goal just feels out of sync with who you are and what you care about, it's going to be really hard to stay motivated.
Yeah, you'll be fighting yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, and lastly, time-bound. Deadlines can be scary.
They can be a little scary.
But they're also incredibly effective.
I agree.
For creating that sense of urgency.
Absolutely.
And holding yourself accountable.
Like, think about it this way. If you have a deadline, you're way more likely to actually schedule time for working on that goal.
Yeah, that's true.
And break it down into those manageable steps.
Right.
Without that time constraint.
Yeah.
It's so easy to just let things slide.
I'll get to it eventually.
Exactly.
So to put this all together, one of my big goals for 2025 is host Speaker, shares a goal, and breaks it down using the SMART framework.
I love it.
I've been thinking about it for a while, but putting it through this SMART filter makes it feel so much more real.
Right.
And achievable.
I think that's the power of this framework.
Yeah.
It takes these kind of vague ideas and turns them into clear, actionable targets.
I like that.
But even with, perfectly crafted SMART goals, there's still the question of how do we actually make them happen?
Right.
And that's where it can feel a little overwhelming.
Yeah, because let's be real.
Yeah.
Even with the best intentions, sometimes these big goals
Totally.
can feel like climbing Mount Everest.
Right.
Where do you even begin?
Exactly. It's about breaking those huge goals down into those like manageable base camps.
Yeah.
The guide actually emphasizes these 3 key steps.
Oh, identifying milestones, creating a timeline,
Okay.
and then scheduling time for each step.
Okay. I like that. Milestones. It's
Yeah.
like those checkpoints along a trail.
Exactly.
Gives you a sense of progress.
Keeps you motivated.
Keeps you motivated, for sure.
So let's say your goal is to learn a new language.
Okay.
A milestone might be completing a beginner's course
Okay.
or being able to hold a basic conversation.
I like that.
Yeah.
So you've got your milestones.
Yeah, and then once you've identified those,
Mm-hmm.
you can create a timeline
Okay.
with specific deadlines.
Oh, okay.
So for example, by the end of March, I will have completed, the beginner's language course.
Yeah.
So the timeline provides that structure,
Yeah.
helps you stay on track.
Okay. And then scheduling time.
Right.
That can be tricky.
It can be.
It's so easy to say, oh, yeah, I'll work on it this week.
Yeah.
And then life just happens.
Life gets in the way.
It never actually happens. It's really about being intentional with your time,
Yeah.
And the guide recommends blocking out those specific slots in your calendar
Okay.
for working on your goal.
Like you would for an appointment or something.
Exactly. Just like any other important meeting.
I see.
Even if it's just 30 minutes every day,
Right.
that consistency really adds up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
For anyone listening who's feeling a bit overwhelmed right now,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say, you don't have to do everything at once.
No.
Start small, pick one goal, break it down,
Yeah.
and schedule those little steps into your week.
You got this.
You got this.
And speaking of marathons,
Okay.
the guide also talks about strategies for staying motivated
Okay.
and overcoming obstacles.
Yeah, because let's be real.
Yeah.
Those are inevitable.
They are inevitable.
So how do we stay motivated when things get tough?
Right. So the guide has some really great techniques.
Right.
One that stood out to me was the power of visualization.
Yeah.
It encourages you to actually picture yourself achieving your goal.
Okay.
What will it feel like? What will you see? How will it impact your life?
Oh, wow.
So you're kind of creating that mental movie of your success.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard about that.
Right. And by vividly imagining that success,
Okay.
you're creating a stronger connection to that goal,
Yeah.
which can fuel your motivation.
When you hit those roadblocks,
Exactly.
it's like giving your brain a preview of the reward
Right. Exactly.
at the finish line.
That's a great way to put it.
And, speaking of rewards,
Yes.
the guide also says we should celebrate those small wins along the way.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get focused on that end goal,
The big picture.
the big picture,
Yeah.
that we forget to acknowledge our progress.
Celebrating those small wins is so important.
Yeah.
For maintaining momentum, keeping that motivation going.
Yeah.
Even something small like treating yourself to dinner
Yeah.
after you achieve a milestone.
Yes.
It can be a powerful thing.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah,
And I think it's important to have a support system,
for sure.
sharing your goals with a friend or family member.
Yeah.
Someone who can cheer you on.
Hold you accountable. It
Yeah.
makes a big difference.
It really does.
Yeah.
I personally have a friend who I host speaker, shares a personal tip for staying motivated, tailored to the listener persona.
Oh, that's great.
It really works for me.
I love that.
It's finding what works for you.
That's the key.
Yeah.
And the guide also gives some advice on overcoming those obstacles.
Yeah. Because sometimes it feels like they come out of nowhere
They do.
and just derail our plans. How do we prepare for that?
So the guide suggests this proactive approach.
Okay.
Identify potential challenges in advance.
Before they happen.
Exactly. Like ask yourself what might get in the way.
Okay.
For example, if your goal is to write a book,
Mm-hmm.
a potential challenge might be finding the time.
Yeah. Especially with a busy schedule.
Exactly.
So you've identified the roadblocks.
Yes.
What's next?
Well, then you got to brainstorm solutions.
Okay.
So in that book writing example,
Yeah.
a solution might be waking up an hour earlier
Hmm?
to write before your day gets crazy,
I like that.
or maybe carving out a dedicated writing weekend.
Okay, so you're making a plan, basically.
Exactly like a contingency plan
Yeah.
for your goals.
But even with the best plans,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes things don't go our way.
They don't. That's why it's so important to stay flexible. Goal setting isn't like this rigid, linear process. It's about adapting and adjusting as you go.
I think that's so important.
It is.
We put so much pressure on ourselves to stick to the plan.
Right.
But life throws curveballs.
It does.
And we need to be willing to pivot.
Absolutely.
I remember when a host speaker shares a story of a time they faced a setback while working towards a goal and how they overcame it.
Wow.
Tough lesson.
Yeah.
But it taught me that resilience is key.
Resilience is everything.
It is.
It's that ability to bounce back from those setbacks and keep moving forward even when things get tough.
Love that.
And, this brings us to the final section of the guide, which focuses on reviewing and adapting our goals.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is something I'm definitely guilty of neglecting.
Really?
It's so easy to just set the goal.
Yeah.
And assume it'll just magically happen.
Right.
Without any further effort.
Yeah.
But I'm sensing that's not the recipe for success.
You're right. Goal setting is not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Okay.
It's an ongoing process that requires check-ins and adjustments along the way.
It's not enough to just set those goals and, have the plan.
Right.
We need to check in with ourselves and see how we're doing.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The guide actually says to schedule these regular check-ins with yourself.
Oh, wow.
Whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, even monthly.
Like a meeting with yourself.
Exactly. It's a chance to, review your progress.
Yep.
Celebrate those wins and course correct if needed.
So every Sunday night, you could sit down with your planner and reflect on the past week.
Exactly.
Did you stick to your schedule? Did you hit any milestones?
What challenges did you face?
Yeah.
It's also a good time to see what's working and what's not.
Okay.
If you're finding yourself, constantly falling short on a certain step, maybe it's time to kind of adjust your approach.
Okay.
Maybe the time slot you chose just isn't realistic.
Yeah.
Or maybe you need to break that step down even further.
The guide actually gave a great example. I didn't practice my language skills this week because I was just too tired after work.
Yeah.
So I'll try shifting my study time to the mornings, before my day gets crazy.
Right. It's about being honest with yourself and making those little tweaks.
Yeah. And sometimes life throws those major curveballs.
It does.
And we need to adjust our goals altogether.
Yeah. Maybe you get a new job that takes up more of your time, or maybe your priorities change.
It happens.
It's important to know when a goal no longer aligns, with your current reality.
It's easy to feel like we failed if we have to adjust.
Oh, yeah.
Or even abandon a goal.
For sure.
But I think it's a sign of strength.
I agree.
To know when something's not working and be willing to adapt.
It's not about giving up. It's about being, responsive to your needs and what's going on in your life.
This deep dive has honestly been so insightful.
Yeah.
I feel like I have so many new tools to use for my goals next year.
You know what? You are in control.
That's true.
You get to choose those goals that really resonate with you, and you design the path that feels right and sustainable.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
That's so well said. This has been such a great deep dive into setting ourselves up for success in 2025.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Don't forget to download the keyword list from the show notes.
It's super helpful.
It's a great reference for when you start, mapping out your own goals.
Here's a final question for you from the guide to kind of leave you thinking. If you could achieve anything in 2025 without any limits, what would it be?
Wow.
Dream big.
That's a great question to start the new year with.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on Talk Room today. We'd love for you to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more deep dives on all sorts of fascinating topics.
We've got some good ones coming up.
We do. Until next time, stay curious.